Good morning or afternoon. For some of you, it's very early in the morning. I appreciate you getting up early to be with us. I'm Elizabeth Debold,
I'm Thomas Steininger.
and we are here for defending the heart of the Open Society. And we'll talk more about how we came to that title in a few minutes. But just to start, welcome and much gratitude to all of you for showing up and for being here. And I also would like to express gratitude to all of the speakers who are volunteering their time to be with us today. It's a real act of generosity, and I deeply appreciate it.
One way one could call this day is also a dialogue in the times of war. And we will talk about this because, as we all know, this is a very difficult situation also for dialogue. And there are a lot of questions how to do that. And we will talk about this. And we really are very grateful for having this opportunity to talk with you and all the people that we have invited to find a way to stand up for something that we find a very crucial part of this, and we call it the heart of the Open Society, and we'll tell you how we got there, and also to find a way to do our contribution in a very complicated situation, so that this war, a tragedy as it is also something that doesn't really completely stop us in where we go as humanity, but allows us to at least take a new start.
Yeah, and actually when Thomas says us to do our work, we're one world in dialogue, where that's the platform that we're on. Which is about bringing the world to dialogue, and we're not at that place, obviously. And it's quite a stark. The only thing that we have in an open society, in a society of a pluralistic society with diverse viewpoints and so forth, the only thing that we have is dialogue. When we move away from dialogue, we move toward what is happening now in Ukraine and Russia. And then you see also that in this context, dialogue is used as a weapon to allow violent motives and to hide. And so these are things that in envisioning a society, a world society that is in dialogue, we also have to deal with and lean into the fact that dialogue is thwarted often by people who have motives like conquest or just a raw power grab. And that's something that we need to be able to hold in the context of seeing dialogue as an ultimate value.
In fact, one thing that took some time already this morning here in Frankfurt, Germany, is to choose the right backdrop for our day here. And it took us a while. We went through a lot of different backdrops and what's the right image to use that? And why we came to this backdrop, and if you have a look at it, it does a couple of things at the same time that seem to be important for us. First, it shows also the whole earth. It forces us somehow to look at what we are looking right now, the war in Ukraine, also from the perspective of the whole globe. But it has in the center the Ukraine, and at least the way I saw this image when I saw it the first time, it is a bleeding heart of this globe. There's a bleeding heart, and it's the bleeding heart as I read this image also of Earth, of where we are now in the beginning of the 21st century, having war raging in the middle of Europe. Also to mention, it's not the first war in the 21st century, as some people rightfully say, we should not have a Eurocentric perspective on that. We did have war in Iraq, we did have war in Syria, we did have war in Libya. There are many wars, and there's something specific about this war, but it is also important to see that to some degree, because I'm European, this is a neighbor country, there's a certain closeness to that, but also not to forget that this is not the only war that we had in the recent time, but it is something that is endangering us in a global situation in many dimensions. We have a lot of crises at the same time, and now we have a war that we kind of thought after the Second World War would not happen in Europe. And how do we deal with that? Mm. And maybe this is also a time to talk about the title.
Mm. Yeah, we started with, at the very beginning, with the title "Dialogue is Peace," but then very quickly realized and felt like we're not talking about Ukraine saying we're gonna just dialogue with Russia and have peace. That that this is not a situation in which that dialogue would be fruitful. And when you're being attacked, when your lives are in danger, you're not in a position, and it's not you're not in a position, and it's not right just simply to dialogue. To defend oneself is important. Then we changed it to defending the open society, trying to create a tension between openness and a capacity for dialogue with the idea of standing for and defending something, seeing those in tension. But the historical context for the term open society is that it typically is really a neoliberal term, a term that refers to open markets. We have an open global market, and that's an open society. And that's not what we mean by open society. We see that there is actually a spiritual or heart context of openness that allows for something different to happen with the pluralism that we are. Right now, we have open markets and many fractions, or a fractured culture everywhere, practically on this globe. There are different sides of culture wars in great friction. The Ukraine situation is a real blow up of a deep difference in cultures, and we're going to hear more about that in the next hour. But so then we changed it again just at the last moment to defending the open heart, or defending the heart of the open society, because that's what we're talking about, and that's what our work is more related to, and what we can do here today. We are not going to make policy here, obviously. We're not going to be making the points that should be taken to the negotiating table if we ever get there. It will happen at some point, but we're not. That's not our point. Our point here is how do we develop our capacity to hold complexity? How do we develop the capacity to deal with the tensions in these conversations without just shutting down and moving away? How do we create living dialogical spaces that can hold this kind of tension rather than fragmenting in the face of it? And that doesn't mean not having a position. And again, this is a complexity that we'd like to bring into the discussion. It's not that to have an open society, and we're talking about the heart of the open society, that we mean everybody, everything is okay. It's certainly not okay. And so to take a strong and deep stand and a principled stand in relationship to a complex topic like this, and yet not separate in terms of our humanness with each other, and that is a capacity that culturally we have not really developed well. And can we here today kind of make some steps in that direction? Can we hold this complexity and differences of opinion and the different demands of the situation, and at the same time not divide from each other?
In fact, what Elizabeth just said, this how to not fragment in our human capacities while taking a position, is and was the core of what we are discussing, how to do this, because it's so much what our work is about, and what we also see what our contribution to the world can be about. And one specific thing that showed the different circumstances of this day is, unlike other programs that we had, we got a lot of pushback for the titles. So when we brought up the title of Dialogue is Peace, some of Ukrainian friends, to my understanding, rightfully said, how can you dare to just talk about peace right now? We are in a situation where we are defending our lives in our country. Yes, peace is great, but it has to be in the context of the right to defend ourselves. And to be honest, I sympathize with this position. I sympathize with this position that not only that Ukrainians are the victims of the situation, that they are overrun by a brutal army, but also that they have a right to defend themselves, and that there's maybe even the need to help them in this. But the other side, we see our practice, our dialogical practice, that's part of our understanding of our work. The deep dialogue is the spiritual practice of the open society. And with the open society, we don't mean open capitalist markets. The opposite. With open society, we mean the capacity to meet in openness, human to human, and to hold this in dialogical spaces, but hold it also culturally, that there's something very spiritual in the capacity to meet in deep dialogue. And that at least our ideal is to organize societies around this spiritual ideal. And that is part of what we practice. And we in the capitalist West are far from doing this, but there's also something where there's a difference between our countries and authoritarian autocracies, and that has to be also honored. And in that sense, or when we call this defending the open society, we also got pushback that we have to take into account that there's a history to this war, because there is also true that there has been the Iraq War, there has been American and Western wars in all kinds of ways that are not justified, and you cannot just talk about the Ukraine and basically leave everything out of the picture and paint the black and white image where here's the good and there's the evil. There is also this whole discussion about NATO pushing east and basically breaking at least verbal agreements. There is all that has to be part of the situation also, and has to be acknowledged. It does not take away that invading a country and creating something like, in my understanding, genocide right now is not justified by anything, but it's a complex situation. How do we deal with complexity? And it's also not our work to, as Elizabeth said, find the right policy about that. What we try to do is create spaces where deep dialogue can be helpful. That's what we try to do today. And that's why, in the end, we are quite happy when we came to the title, Defending the Heart of the Open Society, because it makes a point that there is a heart to be defended. And maybe the way how we are organized in Western Europe and America doesn't hold this heart. I would say so. But maybe there is also something that I find in all the complexity of the situation very humbling to see how the Ukrainian people are standing up for something that I understand being very much oriented towards staying together, finding their own autonomy in creating a democratic society, and having this unbelievable guts to defend themselves against a brutal war. So we don't have the answers. At the same time, we also have positions, and we also respect some other positions. There are some positions that are really against, but I want to respect the person who holds that and find a way how to do that. So this is part of the complexity what we try to do, and what we invite you to do also, because maybe I'm sure most of us have some idea what is right, what is wrong about this, and maybe as confused as we are at the same time. But maybe to do both at the same time today, to be interested in how to do this, but also be maybe as much interested in listening to each other, finding out, being curious, and finding in this respect for each other and in this dialogical space capacity that we can grow together.
And when you were speaking about the Ukrainians and the heart, I think that there is something happening in Ukraine, and we're going to have in the next our first guests are going to be a panel of Ukrainians who are from the meta-modern integral kind of progressive edge in Ukraine. And I think that there is something that's happening in Ukraine between people, and there's something that I find quite powerful and exciting about what could be. They are, and so I'm not talking about all Ukrainians. I'm talking about a particular part of Ukraine, but also I think it's this heart is seems to be quite accurate in relationship to Ukraine. You see rescue workers saving cats from the rubble. You see an incredible care being taken in the midst of utter brutality, and it's not all not all mythic magnificence by any stretch of the imagination, but there is something that's being forged here. I think it's certainly a new national identity, but it's also something for us to pay attention to, for those of us who care about having an open society, a society that is pluralistic, where you are not imprisoned for your perspective. That in a culture, in that culture, what is happening in Ukraine and amongst Ukrainians is quite remarkable, I think. But we just say, so in the work that we want to do together today is educative, like learning more about what's happening with the Ukrainians see happening amongst them. But we're going to have a series of processes also to just keep opening and going deeper to see what it is that we can possibly catalyze, if we can develop our capacity to deal with the complexity of the situation rather than flipping from naivete to cynicism or blocking people out. Can we all participate in the spirit of listening, of being with each other, even if we disagree? If we can develop that capacity a little bit here, or at least explore the dimensions of this possibility, that will be a good day's work. So we've got we have, after our Ukrainian panel, we'll have a session of music from students from who are Ukrainian, who are in a music school in Rostock in Germany. We will have, after that, we will have a series of practices, a meditation with Anagama, a meditation with one meditation group. We'll have global social witnessing and bearing witness practices, the first with Kosha Joubert from the Pocket Project, and the second with Rami Avraham Ifal, who's the former executive director of the Zen Peacemakers International. And then we'll have dialogue with Thomas and I will lead a dialogue. Diane Musho Hamilton will lead a dialogue, and we will finish with a dialogue between Thomas and John Vervecchi about dialogos and the open society. So this is a day to work, to share, to learn, to try to expand our capacity, to hold complexity, to take a stand for a position without shutting out other human beings, and ultimately, thank you very much for your generosity. It's a fundraiser for humanitarian and medical aid to the people of Ukraine. So I think maybe now it would be a good time to maybe meet together, meet a few people who are here, and say hello, and what it is that we're introduce yourselves to each other, break a little ice, introduce yourselves to each other, and share what motivated you to come, what made you curious, and what piqued your interest in coming here.
So we have not prepared our tech support for that yet. So, Mike, if you want to prepare groups for around 7 people, I would say, so that we can talk there for 15 minutes, that would be great.
And in this give people space, allow everyone to have time to speak. So everyone be mindful of your own, the time that you're taking, since we only have, what you said, 15 minutes. And yeah, be curious and listen, as well as share.
From preparation that all of you can do, if you see our name, Elizabeth and myself, we put Frankfurt in Germany behind. And for this kind of conversations, we find it helpful to show up with my name, but also with my place. There's something, because in this virtual spaces that we meet, we have no idea where we come from, but it does something when we see each other with the places that we come from. So if you want to do that also, you don't have to, but if you want to, that really helps, so that we can start this dialogical process, because there are many dimensions to what we try to do today. One is also to find ways how deep dialogue, like what we try to do with the merchant dialogue, but also other dialogues, can be a contribution in extremely difficult world situations like that. So all the challenges that we talked about already, and I'm sure there will be more showing up, how can we meet them in a way that is not kind of naively, let's all hold the hands together and be nice to each other, but also not be kind of war is the solution to everything. How can we use this capacity of meeting in openness, interest, curiosity, with a connection to the depth and the width of our global cosmic reality, so that this coming together is for each and every one of us also a learning process where we come out a little wiser, a little more capable of responding to all of that, because we grow together by being together in doing this, in my understanding, also spiritual practice of deep dialogue. That's part of what I wish for this day, that we can do that, because we cannot solve the world's problem, but we and every single one of us, we can contribute for this to be also a way where something positive can happen and can be learned from this tragic moment in time that we're living in. So if our tech support is ready with the room for 7 people, I would suggest that we open the rooms and we come back in 50 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. Okay, and actually we'd like to change views so that we're all together right now. So that, I think what that means is if you could go to the upper right-hand corner of your little personal or your screen, to hit gallery view so that we can all come together and be together.
And see all of us, and not just the 2 of us.
Yeah, great. And please, if you can, turn on your camera so that we can be here together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and it's great to see where people are from, which is helpful. I see Hong Kong. And I know we have the West Coast of the United States here and a lot in Europe. And deeply appreciate your being here. But just take a moment and realize that this globe, picture of the globe that Thomas and I are sitting in front of is partly represented here. And that we're here together. And this togetherness that we don't often pay attention to is an incredibly important thing for us to be aware of. It's a foundation of it allows us to trust.
It's so easy to use the word we're sitting here together. Like it doesn't, like it would mean nothing. And part of what we try to do is, and I'm sure you experienced it also in the small groups, in a loaded topic like this, that is so difficult to not be invested in. Whatever one is invested in, having certain views or fears or whatever, because this is an issue that is important for all of us, and we are together in this, to be able to find the togetherness, even if I completely disagree, and to see how this is the opposite of war. the desire for mutual understanding is what this is about. And the little contribution that a work like this can do in the situation is to develop pockets of people who put this first, this intention for mutual understanding, to be with each other and first acknowledge the other in the otherness. And it may be the otherness of a political perspective that I really full-heartedly disagree with, or I really have a strong emotional response to. And in the end, we have to find a way to do this together. That does not mean that there is not also a situation where it's justified, and I'm sorry I have to say it this way, it's justified to have war. In fact, in our work, in our dialogical work, we talked a lot about the end of dialogue, the ends of dialogue, and we talked about it sometimes in the context, what does it mean to have dialogue with Hitler? Because it makes it very strong. And that I am grateful that Hitler was opposed also with weapons, because otherwise Europe would be a different Europe right now. But how to do this in a way that in the end is again dialogical, that is not that also kind of, as it happened to some degree after the Second World War, the Allied nations reached the hands and allowed Germany to come back. They did something very different than after the First World War, which was part of the reason for the Second World War. And I'm not saying that it was perfect, but to see the difference of the ending of the First World War and the ending of the Second World War, and to see there is no easy answer. Sometimes one has to oppose something that's deeply evil, and also stand up for that. But can I, with this, also hold a spirit of dialogical orientation in the end, without being naive?
And I think that as we'll hear from the Ukrainians, they are holding this amazing feat of violently, with everything they've got, defending their culture, their people, themselves, each other, and trying not to become that which you are fighting. And that's extraordinary. So we will take a break now for 10 minutes and come back at the top of the hour, where we will have a panel of our friends from Emerge Perspectiva, who will talk about their experience in this war from Ukraine.
See you in